Another week of OHL hockey in the books. It was rivalry week in the OHL, and we welcome you to another episode of the OHL podcast. If you are watching on our YouTube channel, I don't want to hear one word about the way I'm dressed today. If you're not watching on YouTube, just think George Clooney in his tuxedo in Ocean's 11. That's kind of the look I've got going right now, but I literally just got off the bus from London and started recording with Dan Mahar because, with any luck, we're going to finish this before the Blue Jays' first pitch in their do or die game in the ALCS tonight. Not that we're trying to, hurry up with hockey to get to baseball, but it's a big game for us here in Canada, Dan.
It is, and I think if anyone, people are going to comment on the way I'm dressed. I've been doing plumbing stuff all weekend, so you look significantly more well dressed for the pod. And I will say, you've got 3 shirts that I'll top mine because the Black Bulls in your background. I saw someone rocking that at the Odd on Friday night.
That would have been, I'll bet you, my buddy Tom Mercier, who
Oh,
calls games up in Sudbury in the NOJHL, and came by to say hi. He was wearing a Bulls jersey. I don't know if there was another one in the arena on Friday, but shout out to Tom. Good guy. Love seeing him around the rink. That was actually his first visit to Kitchener to see the Memorial Auditorium. So how's that?
oh wow. Well, I hope he enjoyed it because he certainly was attired well for the affair. So
He knows the arena well because Sudbury, of course, was built in that same year, 1951. He knows the Sudbury Arena, but his first trip to Kitchener. And just to go back to what you were saying about your attire for plumbing, I'm glad you wear garbage T-shirts, aka Montreal Canadiens T-shirts for around the house junk plumbing work. Good stuff, right where it
well,
belongs, Dansky.
hard work goes a long way, and I'm just trying to tell William Nylander what that looks like in
Wow.
overtime. But
Jeez, here we go. Forecheck, back check, paycheck, or something like
something.
that.
Well, or in his case, forecheck, paycheck.
That's
I don't know.
exactly. I got what you were throwing down there with that overtime loss for my Leafs. Going back to the George Clooney looking good and dressing as best as I can, having just come from the rink, maybe trying to look as good as Matthew Schaefer if I bring it back to our podcast, Dan, and something. I mean, I don't think you were necessarily breaking news, but maybe just breaking again some hearts in Erie when you pointed out last week that it's unlikely, and I think there would be a consensus on that Matthew Schaefer does not return to the Ontario Hockey League. But how about the youngest NHLer ever to start his career with a 5-game point streak? Come on, Matthew Schaefer.
Oh yeah, he just looks fantastic, and I think when you skate the way he skates, it can cover up so many other errors and flaws in your game. And I'm not saying he has a lot of flaws in his game, but when you are trying to make the leap at that age to the NHL, you're going to need to cover some things up, and it starts with skating like that. That's the first indicator for me he was not coming back. When you look elite out there amongst the elite, you're probably sticking.
And connected to that, a little bit more along the breaking-ish side of news, Kevin Kurz, who covers the Philadelphia Flyers for The Athletic, reporting earlier today, as of our day of recording on Sunday, that Jet Luchenko, a healthy scratch for the Flyers in their most recent game last night on Saturday, are trying to figure out what they want to do with Luchenko. And according to Kurz with The Athletic out of Philadelphia, the thinking right now is return Luchenko to his junior team. So Storm fans, you might want to get excited about that, or you might want to get excited thinking about the prospect of what George Burnett trades Jet Luchenko for. Either way, it sounds like a very talented player might be on his way back to our league, Dan.
Which is great news. I've had a few people this week ask me, what do you think's going to happen with Luchenko? And I said, I feel like the Flyers really wanted to keep him. They kept him up for a bit last year and kind of returned him after a few weeks, and sometimes there's a hesitance to do it a second year in a row because you're feeling like you're telling the player he's failing. You stuck last year and you can't stick this year. That's not the case at all with teenage players. It can be interpreted that way, but I think I've said all along, I believe 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds for the most part, belong in junior hockey. Yeah, you get your Matthew Schaefers and Connor McDavids and those types, sure, they can stick. But for the most part, they belong back. And Jet Luchenko is a great player. I believe still has plenty of developing to do, and it's not going to hurt him to be back in Guelph this year. And a little teaser to that note. So it's not a mistake, Philadelphia, to send him back a second year in a row. But as a teaser, you referenced the trade, Mike, and I think that's a really important piece of information as those Guelph Storm look to potentially host the Memorial Cup next year. That could be the windfall they need to make their team that much better next year.
I was thinking the exact same thing, and we'll get into some much more minor trades later in this episode of the OHL podcast. Having just come back from London, I just want to say thanks to the gentleman. And one of these days, I'm going to get better at doing this and getting names from people and maybe even stopping for a picture so we can add it to our Instagram channel at the OHL podcast. But the gentleman wearing the Canada Life Place jacket, so I'm assuming an arena employee, I think that would be a safe guess, but who stopped me to say loves the podcast. Sir, thank you for that. I've never had a warmer welcome in London. It was just great seeing everybody in London for the first time after much of the London folks were in Kitchener on Friday. Just a great way to end the weekend. And if I may, on that note, a much warmer reception in London on Sunday than I got in Brantford on Saturday. Like, what is up, Telephone City? The Brantford Boys and Girls Club invited me down to be a part of this great fundraiser they were doing for the great work that they do. Like, Brantford BGC, good on you. Love the work you're doing. Had a blast being a part of the fundraiser. But there I was, of course, in Bulldogs country. And I thought, Dan, that it's okay, it would be safe enough. I mean, Eastern Conference, Western Conference. The Bulldogs have been in the league, at least in Brantford, for what, 2 seasons and a bit now? I make one reference to the Kitchener Rangers, and I got booed, and I mean booed mercilessly by this cutthroat crowd at the Brantford Boys and Girls Club. I'm like, hang on a second. Like, why? Maybe it was it just me? Not the Kitchener Rangers? Either way, they love their Bulldogs, but I got a very cool reception just mentioning the Rangers' name.
Well, I was going to say, like, good on you, Brantford Boys and Girls Club. Like, that's great. But my instinct would be it had nothing to do with junior hockey or Kitchen Rangers. I mean, I just think sometimes the sight of Mike Farwell just brings out booze.
Anybody that would like to work on a podcast with me, feel free to send emails to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. Clearly, you see what I get for co-hosts on this show. The friends, in air quotes, like Dan Mahar. Obviously, the rivalry that I didn't know existed between Kitchener and Brantford, but I'm here for it. And it ties in nicely, Dan, to rivalry week in the Ontario Hockey League. I'll tell you what, having just gone through this past weekend in the league, I think this is the week we were waiting for that we didn't know we needed in the OHL. Yeah. What a great marketing idea and a terrific weekend of hockey we just had.
It really was. As a concept, when you see it put in place, do you not kind of think, why wasn't this in place earlier? Because it just seemed so natural, and you have all these natural rivalries that have gone over the years, and they just kind of happen randomly throughout the schedule. So to actually combine it, and you get, you had your Peterborough Oshawa, you have your, like, the rivalries everyone knows. I mean, when Kitchener London's obviously one we were intimately familiar with and involved with. And today I got to see that really intense Erie Brampton rivalry that's been going on for decades. If I had a nickel for every time they had a historic rivalry. No, I'm just kidding. They can't all be great rivalries.
Okay. I was wondering about that because, I thought they were stretching on Brantford Brampton, but somebody had to get the Bulldogs this week. And, some of the others, I don't know, I'm not sure, but good point.
No, you can't have all natural historic rivalries, but they sure have a heck of a lot of them, don't they? I mean, there was a good weekend, and whether it had the same intensity of 1980s hockey in the OHL, that's for others to decide. But I think it was a really cool concept, and it worked out well.
It really did. And as we record on this Sunday evening, Flint Saginaw still in action. Oshawa Peterborough are going to play again. Oshawa Peterborough, for my money, historically, the best rivalry the Ontario Hockey League has to offer. I remember stories from back in the day when, Peterborough was making that trip south down the 35-115 to get to Oshawa. And there's like a rumble in the bus as they approach the arena to play the Gen. So there's so much history between those clubs. I think Ottawa Kingston worked out pretty well. Barrie North Bay, all right. You pair up Sioux and Sudbury, okay. Windsor Sarnia, not bad. I don't mind Erie Niagara, just geographically, it makes some sense there. But I have to be honest with you, Dan. I feel a little selfish with the rivalry that we were able to enjoy this weekend, because I'll bet you there are 18 other teams besides the Kitchener Rangers that would have loved to have the London Knights in for their rivalry weekend. And you and I, having been in Kitchener for our entire lives, would probably remember and agree, I think, that the rivalry for the Kitchener Rangers used to be the Guelph Storm. That was number one with a bullet. Now the Storm this weekend get Owen Sound. Again, not bad. Divisional, the Highway 6 rivalry if you want it. But that Highway 7 rivalry between Kitchener and Guelph was the big one going back into the 80s. But along came the late 90s and into the 2000s. London Kitchener became a thing. And again, selfishly, did we ever luck out with seeing the London Knights a couple of times this weekend?
Sure, but if anyone would really like the London Knights as their rival, we're happy to donate them.
You can have them. We'll pass them off like those donations made at the Brantford Boys and Girls Club this weekend.
Yeah, well, it's a good point though, Mike, because if you take a team like the London Knights or even the Kitchener Rangers, there's these historic franchises that have been around a long time. They probably do have more than one rival, so you kind of figure out who's it going to be. And I mean, the geography suggests Kitchener Guelph, does it not? And London, you're right, probably has a couple. Like you could easily throw London at the Sioux or London at Windsor or Sarnia and make a really viable rivalry there. Obviously, Windsor Sarnia got the geography in your favor, so making these decisions is a little not always easy for the league because they've got some natural ones. Some teams have multiples that work, and other teams have none that work. So you have to be a little creative, but yeah, I don't think anyone complains about probably the 19 teams consider the London Knights their rival, probably. So
Without question. And just to go a little deeper into it, since it's the rivalry that you and I got to see this weekend, Dan, how and when did Henry Brustevich become public enemy number one to the Kitchener Rangers? In the first game on Friday night at the Memorial Auditorium that the Knights win comfortably 6-1. There was a lot going on besides hockey in the second period, and Brustevich seemed to be the center of the Rangers' attention right over to when 6 players, I think, in total were in the penalty box, a whole bunch of them anyway, and there was a lot of barking back and forth. Brustevich with London, McNeil, Cameron Reid for the Kitchener Rangers, and then at the game I just left on this Sunday, I saw Rangers captain Cameron Reid and the Knights defenseman Henry Brustevich, both first rounders to the National Hockey League back in June, having a little conversation at center ice during the pregame warmup. It was right in front of linesman Chris Martinet. He didn't get in to break it up. It wasn't anything that seemed too intense. It was just kind of a casual chat out at center ice. And then lo and behold, about 40 seconds into the game, Brustevich and Cameron Reid dropped the gloves to start the London Knights side of the home and home rivalry. I just don't know how Henry Brustevich became that guy, Dan.
well, I think my opinion with the London Knights, it's that next man up mentality goes year over year with the toughness and the swag, right? And you lose a couple guys, and we saw some newer guys to that game. We saw Ben Wilmot, who's new to this rivalry, playing a bit of that villain role on Friday night, a little bit of chirping going on. And that's just how the Knights roll against Kitchener. It's been a recipe that works. They kind of push them around a little, exert their dominance, and who knows what's being said out there. But there's a lot of chatter happened between Reid and Brustevich on Friday night. There was obviously something bubbling below the surface. I'm not exactly sure what, but don't forget Henry's brother, Hunter, who played for the Kitchener Rangers, of course. And there's, I believe, some off-ice familiarity with a lot of the Kitchener Rangers players in Henry, and I'm not sure it's as animus as it seems off the ice, but there's sometimes those things boil over. Conversations are had both on and off the ice, and sometimes captain like Cam Reid says, yeah, well, we got embarrassed in our barn Friday night. I'm sending a message to my bench. Henry, can you do me a solid here? It could be as simple as that.
And I was about to say the same thing. Kudos to Henry Brustevich for saying, absolutely, let's do this. Not that he's doing Cam Reid a favor by any stretch, but Henry Brustevich, I like that in a hockey player. I think it goes without saying that we all like watching him on the ice. And you mentioned Ben Wilmot as well. Really enjoyed what I saw from him this weekend. So a lot of fun for us as Kitchener Rangers and London Knights fans. And I think around the league, based on what I've been hearing, rivalry week was an unqualified success. So again, the week that we didn't know we needed, we certainly enjoyed in the Ontario Hockey League. Let's stick with toughness for just another moment here, Dan, because you referenced it, and talk about Matthew Halachar of the Kitchener Rangers. Arguably not just the toughest guy on the Kitchener Rangers, but one of the league's heavyweights. But fans either in Kitchener or elsewhere haven't been able to see Halachar for a while because while up in the Sioux a couple of weeks ago, Halachar was given a 5-minute major for a blindside hit on Jakob Winkelhofer of the Greyhounds. Fortunately, Winkelhofer not injured, but the indefinite suspension assessed to Halachar after the match penalty turned into, I'm going to call it a 3-game suspension, and then 3 more tacked on by the league because Matthew Halachar is a known commodity, shall we say, in the commissioner's office and the disciplinary office of the OHL. What do you make of the 6-game suspension for Halachar?
Well, I'm okay with it on the repeat offender premise. To the eye test, everyone might say, well, that's 6 games is a lot, but consider there is a history with the player and there's a history of very similar looking hits. So if Matthew Halachar is trying to add an element to this team that it has been lacking, and an element that got him drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 6th round of the draft last year, so he's trying to bring these things to the table. However, if Matthew Halachar has a bit of a blind spot in his game, it's that these hits are often a tad late, a tad from the side, and often a bit high. So he's got this tendency to kind of run and leap into guys, and he's got to correct that habit in his game because there's certain flags referees are looking for on the hits. Is it late after that 2 count? Does the player kind of launch up into the head, or is it from the blind side? Those are the 3 things that are going to flag you for discipline. And when a player does it multiple times and the discipline didn't work, well, then the discipline gets longer. So all in all, I think it's just a little thing Matthew Halachar is going to have to correct in his game if he wants to be impactful, because to be impactful, he has to be in the lineup and he has to not take penalties and put his team down. So it's just the mechanics, the tactics of your hit. You can still be physical. You mentioned he's the toughest guy in the Kitchener Rangers. Well, I don't think too many people want to mess with Andrew McNeil or Max DiRiccolo either, but they're not quite taking the suspensions as often. So it's just playing on the line, not over it.
A couple of things that I loved from the Ontario Hockey League on this. The first of which was it harkened back to the days of Brendan Shanahan being in charge of the Department of Player Safety with the National Hockey League, where Shanahan would put out a video explanation of penalties and why suspensions were issued, etc. We got some video of the Halachar hit from the league when it announced this suspension to Halachar. So I liked that. I would like to think it's going to become a habit, but I don't know. We've been here before with the OHL and the NHL for that matter, and the idea of sharing video and having an explanation kind of went by the wayside. But I really do like it because the more knowledge we have as fans, the better. So if you explain things in detail, we understand what's suspension worthy, why it was deemed a suspension. I think it just makes us all better. But connected to that too is the great explanation, and I'll attach the word transparency to this on the part of the league, saying essentially it's 3 games for the hit and it's 3 more because this is a repeat offender in the league. So that's how it adds up to the 6. And I love that the league was so direct about that. Obviously now from here, it becomes precedent setting, I would say. Matthew Halachar is certainly not the only player to have run afoul of the league's disciplinary office on multiple occasions. So you've set the bar for repeat offenders, but I really like what the league did in this from a transparency standpoint as well. It's a winner across the board from where I'm sitting.
100%. We've talked about this a number of times over the years where communication goes such a long way in every realm, whether coach to player, player to coach, league to team, league to fans, you name it. Communication is everything. It's such a big piece. And I've never understood any of the leagues that are secretive about these things and tight-lipped and don't explain their thinking. That goes a long way because, once you've explained it, people will often, they might disagree with you, but at least they say, okay, well, I can kind of see the argument, I see the point. If you say nothing, you're just opening yourself up to a world of hurt from assumptions, misunderstandings, all those kind of things. So, and like we said, just out of respect for your fans and your teams, the people that follow your league, communicate, period. So yeah, good on them for doing it.
don't know how you feel about this news that Jeff Merrick is reporting, but I'm pretty darn excited about it, Dan. That Merrick is saying that the Ontario Hockey League is about to go back to a live draft in 2026. Now, I want to add to this something else that we know about the OHL draft for 2026 is that it's going to move to June to keep it more connected to the NHL draft. And that is something that we told you about on this podcast earlier this week through the winter of 2025. Got some intel that this was going to be happening. And I know that we mentioned it to you. And I want to just add to that those same sources who were pretty well connected in offices around the OHL that hinted to me last year that the draft was going to be moving to June, also said at the time the conversations were underway to make it a live draft again. So that just adds more weight to what Merrick is saying right now. The league is yet to confirm, but based on what I just shared with you, all signs to me, Dan, are pointing to this being a live draft next spring. And come on, in Kingston, what a spot to have it. I'm loving this again across the board.
Yeah, I really think it's a great thing in general. So a draft, you see it with the NHL, it gets such good publicity for your league. It's such an event. And I understand that there were kind of two big reasons why it moved away from a live draft. One being cost, of course. You have to have the arena booking it. An in-person event's always more expensive. And the other piece was they didn't like how many kids were coming to the draft and not being drafted or being disappointed with how things went down. And as a guy who's had a friend, and when we were at our draft age and there was a live draft in Kitchener, had the whole family suit and tie and everything, and an agent telling him he was probably going to be around the third round and didn't go, and just seeing the despondency he had after leaning on the railing outside in the auditorium. And yeah, you don't like those scenes, but there's definitely workarounds to that. Let's be realistic about the draft. Let's be realistic from agent to player, from team to agent. Let's try and just make this a good event. And if you choose to attend, know what can happen. Just soak it all in if that's the case. But for the most part, it's going to be a great event in Kingston. What a great city to host. Let's hope that regardless of how many players and their families show up, let's hope the remainder of the seats are filled by those fans and they demonstrate to this league what a great OHL market it is. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, Mike.
I think it becomes a bit of a showcase for Kingston, if I'm honest with you, Dan. Yes, sure, fans in Kingston would be expected to show up, but don't tell me that people aren't going to go to the city of Kingston in June on the waterfront, on those great patios, in that city with so much to offer, and attend the draft just as fans of this junior game. There will be road tripping to the Limestone City, you can be sure, when this rolls around. So it's an opportunity as well to get more eyes on a great venue at Slush Puppy Place. And again, see that city firsthand, which is a great city to experience, especially in the summertime. So I'd like to think that's an added benefit to all of this. To your point about the players, you said something that I think matters a lot in this, and that is soak it in. And I know it's easier for me to say because I'm not one of the players hopeful of going in the top 3 rounds or any time in that OHL draft. But if you can have the right mindset that whether you get drafted or not, this is a great experience to take in, to be around those people, to be in that atmosphere. That, again, is a win from where I'm sitting. So hopefully we can keep expectations in check and have a great live event in Kingston next June. I can't wait. And maybe the OHL podcast should road trip there. I know Jimmy Gilchrist pretty well. He'll probably put us up at his house, have some bud in the fridge for us, Dansky.
I was just going to say, I never need much excuse to go to Kingston, especially in summer. So I'm in. I'm all in. I think we'd be negligent to our followers if we didn't go. So
consider the OHL podcast penciled in for the live draft in Kingston next June. Okay, I know you're wondering what's happening in your market around the Ontario Hockey League. Well, I'm glad you're wondering because Dan and I have the answer to that with the Wraparound coming up as we continue this week's episode, Rivalry Week in the books here on the OHL podcast. Hockey is back, and this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, brings you all the speed, skill, and nonstop action you love. New customers, bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get paid out $300 in bonus bets instantly. Look, if anyone needed a betting product, the DraftKings Sportsbook is the only one you need. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Every week on this show, we like to make sure we keep our eyes on every market in the Ontario Hockey League. So 20 markets, 20 teams, and Dan and I split it up between the East and the West for something we call the Wraparound. And Dan, you are on Western Conference duty this week. What do you got for us from the Erie Otters?
Well, I wish it was better news, but from the Erie Otters, it's rare when you look at the standings and you see a team has the fewest goals scored in the conference and the most goals allowed. That's not a place you want to be. That's where we are with the Erie Otters right now. So, it'll get better. It's easy enough to tighten that up, but let's hope in June next year in Kingston, they find themselves a goal scorer.
I love the way you brought it back. Let's just keep pumping the air into the balloon that is a live draft in Kingston, and I'm sure the league will pick up on all of this.
100%.
As I start in Barrie, also, I wish I could give you better news, Colts fans, but it's a bit of a struggle right now. The Colts have lost 5 in a row, but here's a note for you. Overager Brad Gardner stands out. He's got 4 goals, 5 assists in his past 6 games, and with 265 games played between Ottawa and Barrie, Gardner has played the 5th most games among active OHLers. Guelph's Ethan Miedema has played the most at 276, but not that far behind is Brad Gardner. And if you'll indulge me, Dan Mahar, I just want to throw in a stick tap to former Colt Mark Scheifele, who recorded NHL point number 813 on the weekend, which gives him the most points in Winnipeg Jets franchise history. And fans of this league and the Barrie Colts will remember Scheifele putting up 217 points across 158 games in the OHL. When we were in Saginaw with the Kitchener Rangers a few weeks ago, the Spirit have a banner on the side of the arena that says, "Here today, NHL tomorrow." And that's what makes this game great. We got to watch Scheifele a little more than a decade ago in this league, tearing it up, and now we get to watch him set a franchise record in the NHL.
Kitchener boy, who's at 16 years old, was dominating in Junior B for the Kitchener Dutchmen. So all you players who are in Junior B at 16, just the start. Don't worry about it.
Another excellent point.
Moving to Flint, Mike. So a little bit of housekeeping in Flint this week. Former first-round pick Jeremy Martin sent off to the Sioux in return for Brady Smith. A little change of scenery for both players. So plenty of skill there. Let's see if they pick it up in new markets. But I also wanted to point out, how could I not? Mason Vicari, goalie of the week. I guess when you don't give up a goal and you're a goalie, that puts you in the front runner for goalie of the week. So good on Mason for the week he had.
All right, for the Brampton Steelheads, they finish off rivalry weekend with the win over the Erie Otters, who Dan already talked about. Before that, though, it was back-to-back games against the Brantford Bulldogs, which just so happens to be the former team of Joshua Avery. And Avery picked up points for the Steelheads in each of those weekend games against Brantford. Also, some brotherly love now in Brampton as the Steelheads sign forward Lucas D'Amelio, younger brother of current Steelheads forward Julian D'Amelio.
Nice. And yeah, a little Brantford Tyner tidbit there. Same with mine with Guelph. I love these little shrewd moves under the surface that don't grab a lot of attention, but I think are great moves the GMs make here and there. And that's, looking for excess defenders. And Brantford had one in Patrick Babin. Guelph picks him up for a second and third round pick. And I think there's a whole lot of potential there for that 17-year-old defender. And looking to the future, Guelph loading up for next year, that will be a shrewd move in a year's time.
Brantford is this year's team, and more on those trades that Dan just alluded to in Flint and Guelph a little bit later on in this episode. But as I look at Brantford, I mean, what do you say? The Bulldogs scored a season-high 9 goals in a Saturday win over Brampton. They outscored the Steelheads 16-6 over their 2 weekend rivalry games. In their past 5 games, all wins, brace yourself, the Bulldogs have scored 7, 6, 8, 7, and 9 goals. So it will come as no surprise to you that Brantford leads the OHL in goals with 61 scored over just 10 games. I can do that math. more than 6 goals on average per game. They are a wagon, Dan Mahar, in Brantford.
They're goalie killers, that team. Wow.
Oh,
All right. So, Mike, question for you on my next stop. Who do you think was the first OHLer to hit their 3-fight limit this year?
that would be Weston Cameron of the Kitchener Rangers.
Bingo. That's where I'm stopping on my wraparound tidbit for Kitchens. I'm not sure how many predicted that would have been the case, but yeah, 17-year-old forward Weston Cameron. First OHLer to hit his 3-fight limit this early in the season, and obviously Grant Spade of the Guelph Storm was not happy with it because he hit his later that game. He said, "You beat me to it in the same game."
And hey, let's give a shout out to Weston Cameron for his first OHL goal in the game I just came from in London.
That too. Great week for Weston.
It certainly has been. All right, to Kingston I go on the eastern side of this wraparound, and that's where we find 17-year-old center Robin Kuzma, who scored his 4th goal of the season in the France win on Sunday over Ottawa. But so what, right? It's a 4th goal of the season. Well, what makes this goal notable for Kuzma is that it was his first goal this season against a team not named the Oshawa Generals. Kuzma scored his first 3 OHL goals in Kingston's 3 games already against Oshawa this season.
Love that kid's one-timer, by the way. London. Just everyone was worried about them early in the season, right? Everyone, oh, what's wrong with London? Well, they lost a few games to start the year. Remember I said, don't worry about it. They're going to be a wagon soon. Well, no regulation losses in their last 7. Yes, I know they dropped an overtime game to Kitchener in the second end of the rivalry series, but they still got it to overtime. So no regulation losses for that team in the last 7. They're okay.
To Niagara for me, and boy, how much do I love this. You know, we've been talking, Dan, in recent times about the woes in Niagara, and I'm not going to document them again here because things are certainly trending in the right direction. But I've made reference to that market deserving better, St. Catharines, the Niagara area, because it's so steeped in junior hockey history, and the Ice Dogs did it good this past weekend, honoring 80 years of hockey history in St. Catharines with a specialty jersey that featured the yellow of the former TPs and Falcons with some red striping as a nod to the old Blackhawks. The Ice Dogs also raised a couple of yellow banners to the rafters at the Meridian Center, remembering Pierre Palat and Rudy Pilas of the TPs. Both won Stanley Cups with the Chicago Blackhawks, Palat as a player and Pilas as a coach. Well done, Niagara.
Nice history.
You bet.
All right, and I love pointing at these stats in the standings as well. So you've got the Owen Sound Attack second in league points, first in league penalty minutes. And, you know, I'll just kick in. It's baseball season. You referenced the Blue Jays off the top, so I wanted to announce the early season Cy Young favorite in the OHL, which is Owen Sound's Nicholas Sikora with 8 goals and 1 assist to date.
I love the Cy Young in hockey. And hey, a question for you, Dan Mahar.
Yes.
Are the Owen Sound Attack for real?
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this team is
no
absolutely.
doubt.
Okay, everybody. Yeah. Hey, Owen Sound. We're all on to you now, just so you know. All right, in North Bay for me, I'm looking at rookie Cam Warren, who's headed to Nova Scotia. But don't worry, Battalion fans, he's coming back. Warren will play for Canada Red, one of 2 Canadian teams at the U17 World Challenge next month. Warren was the Battalion's first-round pick back in April, going 6th overall. He currently leads the Battalion with 10 points through 11 games.
Oh, great start. Yeah, so I referenced the Erie Otter struggles early in the wraparound. Well, moving to Saginaw, 1 goal fewer allowed is the Saginaw Spirit than the Erie Otters. So also a team struggling to keep that puck out of their net. And, you know, it's tough to have the return to glory that they've had the last few years unless they tighten up a little bit on D. So I think we'll see Chris Lazari get that team going in the right direction. But yeah, a few too many allowed at this point for the Saginaw Spirit.
I'm looking now at Oshawa and the Gens finally returning home this weekend after a 5-game roadie that took them through Sarnia, Flint, Windsor, Peterborough, and Kingston, going 2-3 on the trip. But Beckett Seneca, Gens fans, it's looking less likely that he's going to come home to Oshawa. I'm not going to say 100% certain yet, but Seneca has 4 points through 4 games with Anaheim in the NHL. I know Gens fans want him back because that's probably a piece, and by probably I mean definitely a piece that Roger Hunt moves for assets, but I don't know. Seneca looking awfully good with them Ducks right now.
Yeah, NHL GM, see a player producing. They keep him. All right, and it ties in nicely to my next one, Mike and Sue, a team who I was going to note are allowing a few more goals than Sue historically likes to allow. So we'll see that tighten up as the year goes too. But I want to note that the Brady Martin watch is on as well. Not getting in a lot of games for Nashville right now. There's some speculation. Maybe around the start of November, get him another home game or two in Nashville before his 9-game threshold and send him back. But I think the watch is on, rumbling starting to pick up that he will be back in red and white before long.
Couple of weeks ago, it was the Brantford Bulldogs and Ottawa 67s with 0 losses. In fact, Ottawa 0 losses across the board. Brantford has not yet lost in regulation, but of course, Brantford beat Ottawa, giving the 67s their first loss of the season. How did they respond to that? In very fine fashion, if you ask me. Goalie Ryan Fedorov picking up his first career OHL shutout in the follow-up to the loss in Ottawa's 3-0 win over Kingston. Fedorov made 13 saves for the shutout. Dan, come on. Like, is that half a shutout?
I was going to say that's an easy night for him.
No, congratulations to Ryan Fedorov, first career OHL shutout.
A shutout is a shutout.
Exactly. They don't ask how many saves you made. They just know you got the shutout.
That's right. So moving to Sarnia. So you loved the story about Dervin and Kingston last week about increasing his OHL draft stock to NHL draft stock. Well, I got another one for you this week, Mike, and that is the powerhouse that is Lucas Fisher and Sarnia. An 11th round OHL pick, 2nd round NHL pick to St. Louis. And how about as a defender, a point a game, 8 points in 8 games, and a +9. That, my friends, is a difference maker, and that's why you're starting to see Sarnia pick up steam.
Over to Peterborough for me on the wraparound, and Matthew Soto picked up his 100th career assist and his 169th point in a weekend win over Ottawa. The overager Soto leads the Petes with 12 points. Peterborough is looking to sweep rivalry week as we record, with wins already this weekend over Oshawa and Ottawa.
Nice. Awesome. And I recognize for those they're better with the alphabet than me, I went slightly out of order, flipping Sarnia and Sue. So Sue put you back in your place with just a nod to Ryan Kaczynski, first rounder that got 2 goals in his this week, first 2 of the season. But ending on Windsor, have to note, you get these players and they're winding down their OHL careers and step into much bigger roles. But how about Carson Woodall, 17 points in 13 games for those Windsor Spitfires? Who saw that coming? But if you keep thinking, when's this pace going to slow off? And it has not slowed off yet. So great start offensively to the season for Mr. Woodall.
How about, Dan, all 17 points assists? We had the Cy Young, right, in Owen Sound earlier with Sikora, 8-1, 8 goals, 1 assist. 0-17 is Carson Woodall, but when the 17 are all assists, terrific season so far.
Yeah, he's pitching for the Miami Marlins, I think, with that record. But yeah, he knows his role, right? Get the puck to the net. You got a lot of talent up there, and they're gonna tip it home. They're gonna get rebounds. So he knows his role.
All right, I will finish my wraparound in the Nickel City of Sudbury, and there's some hope, Wolves fans. There's some hope in the den. Okay, Kieran Walton and Nathan Villeneuve are both back in the lineup. The Wolves picked up just their 2nd win of the season this past weekend and their first on home ice when they opened rivalry week with a win over the Sioux. Now, here's the thing. Both Walton and Villeneuve have more than a point per game as Sudbury slowly creeps up from a league low 22 goals scored so far. They're moving up the right way. Those guys will help, but a league low 22 tallies for Sudbury so far this season.
Yeah, need some support on the flanks for those players for sure.
All right, that's the wraparound with a look at every market in this Ontario Hockey League. Dan alluded to a little bit of this. The trade winds were blowing through the league this past week. And of course, we have your prospect of the week, the NHL draft eligible player that caught the most of Dan's and my attention. Stay with us as we continue on the OHL podcast. Well, Dan, you did touch on this during your wraparound through both Flint, Sault Ste. Marie, Guelph, Brantford involved. Here's what went down. Patrick Babin goes from Brantford to the Guelph Storm. Babin was the top scoring 08D in the GOHL, last year with the Brantford 99ers. Sarnia grabbed Jack O'Brien from the Sioux, and Flint gets Brady T. Smith from the Sioux for Jeremy Martin. Interesting. This is a swap of former first rounders, right? Smith went 17th to Oshawa in 2024 and then came over to Sioux in that Andrew Gibson trade last year. Martin was 15th overall to Flint in 2023. But what do you make of the moves that were made this past week?
Yeah, that last one, the Flint Sioux trade, classic change of scenery move. I think you got players that have good pedigree, good skill. Everyone can see it here and there. It's just not realizing itself consistently. So maybe sometimes a change of scenery, change of line mates, change of dynamic in the team will do it. So I think that's what both those teams were thinking. Probably got together and say, hey, it's not quite working here, but these players are very similar pedigree. Why not? I do know on the Sarnia trade, though, I'm pretty sure fans of the Brantford Bulldogs had a bit of a heart attack when they first read Jack O'Brien, did they not?
Instead of, I confess, I did a double take. I'm like, wait, Jake O'Brien just got traded to Sarnia? What?
Yeah, that's exactly. I had to take a quick double take. But again, when I talked about the shrewd move that was Patrick Babin going to the Guelph Storm, very similar on this one. You look at a team that needs a little bit more support on the back end. They've had some injury troubles the last couple of years, and they know what it's like to lose a couple bodies and need them. So Jack O'Brien's a guy that's going to be able to give you those minutes at a decent caliber already and young enough to grow into a bigger role. So I love those moves, Mike. Often it's just that little change of scenery. A guy needs a little more opportunity in a market that's kind of not as veteran laden, and who knows where it'll go. But I think those are really shrewd moves by those GMs to identify those players that might be available now that might not be in a year.
Babin is absolutely going to get that opportunity in Guelph. There's no question about that. A stacked team in Brantford really doesn't leave him a lot of room. And you talk about that change of scenery in the Brady T. Smith and Jeremy Martin swap. Smith from the Sioux to Flint and Martin from the Firebirds back to the Greyhounds. I would just like to thank general managers Kyle Raftis in Sault Ste. Marie and Dave McParland in Flint for separating the Brady T and the Brady R. Smith. Okay, just as somebody that does some play-by-play in this league, you don't, what are you saying here? Brady T. Smith, Brady R. Smith. Smith has the puck. No, wait, it's Brady R. Smith has the puck. No, wait, it's Brady T. No more of that nonsense.
Yeah, well, Sue still has a few too many Bradys, but at least they're starting to help you out here, right? So.
How about this? Just as one little oddity attached to all of it. So Brady T and Brady R. Smith had been, until this trade, together in the Sioux. So now the Sioux can just have a Brady Smith, and Flint can just have their own Brady Smith. But wait, there's more. There's a Brady Smith on the blue line for the Sudbury Wolves as well. Like what in HE double hockey sticks, Dan Mahar, is this all about? 3 Brady Smiths in the league at the same time.
Well, I think if anyone was relieved to see this trade, it was probably Brady Smith of the Sudbury Wolves, because he had to he could relax and say, well, maybe Sue is not after me at this point. I'm not going to be a Greyhounds.
They're accumulating all the Brady Smiths, right? Yes. Brady Wasselin, Brady Martin, we're having a Connor moment in hockey right now, right? Everybody's got the same name.
Yeah, I think if you can have the 3 best Brady Smiths, you're doing well.
We got to get the all Brady Smith team. We're almost there.
We're almost there. Just need a couple more.
Exactly. One more forward, another D, and then find a Brady Smith to play goal for you. Okay, enough of the silliness. It's serious business when it comes around to our prospect of the week. This is the NHL draft eligible player that caught most of our attention over the past 7 days. Dan, I will turn to you first for your prospect of the week.
All right, I'm going to go a little bit down the list here for someone that I think is sneaky to watch for now that he's getting his footing in the OHL, and that is Zach Nyman of the Brampton Steelheads. And here's a kid who got a goal and 2 assists in his first game in the OHL. And, a 5th-round pick of the Steelheads. Keep in mind, this was a kid who had first overall projections in his draft year in 2024 into the OHL. Obviously had BCHL and NCAA aspirations, so dropped a little bit in the draft. But, he was thought of for sure in the top 5 of that draft, if not higher. So here's a kid that has a lot of skill, a 5'9" defender, not a big guy, but can fly and can be really dynamic when he's on his game. So he introduced himself to the league, Mike, this week, but watch for it to go from here, because that's a really high-end player that not many know about yet.
So would you say you went fishing for this prospect this week, Dan?
You could say that, yes.
Okay, I mean they call them the trout in Brent. That's you want the weak jokes and the dad jokes. They come from this guy over here. Dan and I have already established that indeed the Owen Sound attack are for real. Although I think the Owen Sound attack have established that they are for real, and perhaps one of the reasons for that is the play of Cole Zurowski, who is my prospect of the week. How about 6 points in his past 4 games, including 2 goals and an assist versus Guelph on the weekend? That's when Guelph Today reporter Tony Saxon called Zurowski the best player on the ice. And quite frankly, if Tony's eye test says it's so, then that's plenty good enough for me. But Zurowski sitting on 10 points through 9 games this season. That's already 1/3 of the way to his point total from a season ago. So thriving is Cole Zurowski in Owen Sound right now, and he is my prospect of the week.
Great call, and that's a guy who I guarantee you, every year we identify a few people that are going to go higher in the draft than people think. That's a guy that will, because NHL type toolbox on Cole Zurowski.
I feel as though, Dan, we're kind of settling into this time in the Ontario Hockey League where things are starting to fall into place. You talked about London. A lot of people were celebrating, the fans especially of other teams were celebrating London's slow start, but they've rounded into form. We're starting to see some teams unfortunately struggle that look like they're going to have a hard time climbing out of some holes. Minor surprises here and there. I'll still look at Kingston as a bit of a surprise right now. Niagara's certainly holding it together. Some players are going to be returned to lineups, but I think we're getting into that comfortable time where we're seeing some really good hockey week over week. I just don't know how the league is going to answer rivalry week. Like, it's almost going to be a letdown next week. I still want you to go to the games, but my gosh, what a week we just had.
We did, and you referenced it too when we talked about teams are starting to understand what they are, and this is the time of the year when we get some interesting moves start to happen. Some teams start to tip their hands. So we're a little bit early, but as we get into November, for sure, you're going to start to see it. It'll be really interesting to see what some GMs determine the plan will be, because I think there's a few teams where the fans don't know yet.
Keep your ears and eyes this week on Jet Luchenko. As Dan and I already talked about, Kevin Kurz of The Athletic covering the Philadelphia Flyers says it seems likely that Luchenko is headed back to the Ontario Hockey League. Of course, as we record this on a Sunday evening, I hope that hasn't happened by Tuesday, or this is already dated information, but just remember where you heard it, okay? We're going to go watch first pitch, Jays and Mariners, and hope there's a Game 7, and we will encourage you to interact with us, leave a comment either on the audio channel that you're listening on, our YouTube channel, which is at the OHL Podcast. That's the same for Instagram. Drop us an email anytime, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. You'll find Dan Mahar on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I'm at Farwell_OHL, and we will be back in your ears, and if your eyes can handle it, on YouTube in 1 week's time here on the OHL Podcast.